Well, first of all, thank you, A3, for organizing this. I so much fully agree with Chris. If I was a vendor, I'd hire A3 Communication for my PR, and that's what we do. Years after years, it's also a pleasure to be back in front of you all. My first slide here is a little bit provocative, but you know, in these days and age where everyone claims anything is marketing material, it's sometimes difficult to differentiate between what people say and what you actually do. So, you know, sometimes some of the things we say and do, you may think, well, this is not very impressive because all of your competitors are saying the same thing, and I would challenge you to check whether they're also doing it. There's a lot of fluff in the industry. So not just talk, we actually do it, is one of the themes for today. The other theme is the hybrid cloud data and digital transformation. We are announcing today that we are launching Ring version 8, and Ring version 8 is significantly more, and we're going to talk about it in the next hour and a half, than 7, and you'll see how. Before I talk, actually, Brad will be talking about V8, and we've also prepared a small demo for you because we know you like demos and not just talk, and we want to show that we actually do things. Before we talk about V8, I'd like to talk a little bit about where we stand. So first of all, it's our 10-year anniversary, so you can all sing a happy birthday. And
happy birthday to you.
And Rachel, if you want to give cupcakes to everyone, we just after lunch we thought that you needed some dessert, and we have some special 10-year cupcake for all of you. You know, I had no idea how fast 10 years go.
You have kids, that's a lie.
Say that again?
You have kids, that's a lie.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, looking back, it's pretty impressive the number of innovation we've brought to the market. Here we've listed the things that we have kept. There's actually many other things that we've done and decided to not keep. I mean, there were so many things we tried. At some point, we tried to put block storage on the Ring technology, and it didn't stick. It was actually a customer who deployed Ring on Flash and said, why don't you do block? So we said, okay, well, maybe that's a good idea. And we realized actually it was not such a good idea. We also, some of us have been in the industry long enough to remember, there was a time when SNIA, the Storage Networking Industry Association, was pushing for a standard called CDMI for object storage. I mean, one of the things that slowed down object storage adoption in the first years was the lack of standard. And so we very much believed in the idea that there should be an industry standard and we should not all be slave of Amazon. Well, that didn't work. So we all now wed to Amazon, whether we want it or not, but the standard is the AWS S3 API, although there's a few people in the industry that are like the French, comment on dit Gaulois en anglais? Gaelic? Non, c'est pas Gaelic. Comment on dit Gaulois en anglais? I need help here.
C'est Gaelic.
Gaelic. No, it's not Gaelic.
Vikings.
Well, okay, so the French who were resisting Jules César by being independent, and you obviously have...
I know the German word.
Okay, well, that will help me tremendously. It's weird that I don't know.
It is Gaelic, yeah.
Is it Gaelic?
It is
Okay,
Gaelic,
so like the Gaelic. So we obviously have a...
No, it's goals.
Yeah.
It's
Gauls.
goals.
The
It's
Gauls.
goals. It's the
Gauls,
goals.
yes, the Gauls.
Absolutely, it's the goals.
It's the Gauls,
Yes, absolutely. We just needed an English translation of Asterix and it would work. My point here is that obviously Microsoft Azure keeps a different API, as you all know. So there's still some resistance in that industry, but pretty much everyone else has aligned to the S3 API. We've got over an exabyte capacity in production. The number I like is a trillion of objects stored over our customers. There's one ring that has over 220 billion objects on one ring. One thing that's funny, we were talking with Microsoft and talking about what we do, and especially on SMB. At some point in the meeting, the person we were talking to realized, do you realize that you're powering one of the largest SMB share in the world? And we had no idea that what we were doing was so extraordinary. So we have two customers, one that has a 10 petabyte SMB share and the other one has a 20 petabyte SMB share in production. The 10 petabyte one is actually for very active data because it's mostly video distribution. So not only it's an SMB share, but it's a very active SMB share. Over 700 million users. I wish it was daily, but it's actually monthly. That's a typo. But 700 million users around the world, that's a lot. You may say, but how is that possible? We just have so many service providers and they go by 50 million at a time. So you quickly get to 700 million. But many people depend on Ring. We guarantee 100% uptime. Not only we guarantee it, but we do it. We guarantee this with SLAs. So in the life of the company, we introduced this not at the very beginning. I think we introduced this in 2013. So to be fair, in the past 6 years, we have paid SLA only once. We've never had to pay SLA, except for one time. So not only we give a guarantee, but we actually meet it. By now our customers have been mixing different types of hardware, different brands, different generation of hardware, different size of hard drive, and it actually works, contrary to the history of storage. So 10-year anniversary, we're super proud, super happy, and super happy of what we've been bringing to the industry. Thank you, phone. You don't need to ring. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Quickly, who are our customers? 60% of the world's largest service providers. We've got Orange in France, we've got UPC in Austria, we've got Telstra in Australia, we've got SoftBank, KDDI, Comcast, Cox, pretty much all around the world. 50% of the world's largest bank in US, EMEA, Latin America. Let's be more precise, we've got 6 of the top 12 banks in the Western world. And you look at the list, we've got 6 out of 12. Major national, international video broadcasters, that's in 5 countries. Lots of sports, we've got Eurosport in France. Well, in France, we've got Eurosport TF1. We serve TDF, which has some of the major channels. We signed 24 hospitals in how many countries? In 11 countries in 18 months. Hospitals is the fastest growing segment for us. That's also how we get many million people actually using the Ring. In many of these hospitals, if the radiologist is going to receive a patient and looks at an X-ray image that is more than 3 months old, it is called from the Ring.
So is it in the US or is it worldwide? The hospitals in
11 countries.
All right. Is Germany one? Because I guess not, because I think that
None in Germany.
the regulation and the deciding circle is just too long for your colleague, I'd say. The time, how their budget works, that's why I'm...
The sales cycle,
the
yeah.
Cycle, as in the
Yeah,
decision making.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
I don't know that, do we have prospects in Germany? Do you know that
We
for a fact?
have had discussions.
Yeah, okay.
I'm not surprised that it's, I think there are some
Charité in Berlin, for instance.
Yeah. So 11 countries, that's already pretty good. We've got one in Colombia, we've got one in Qatar, we've got several in Israel, France, UK, obviously, US as well. But indeed, not in Germany.
So
yes,
are
Enrico.
these hospitals still using file or
File. The hospital market is all file.
all file? And all
It's
file.
all file. Mostly in hospital, we replace Isolate. Mostly.
So you've probably seen our tagline already. Hybrid cloud data solved. Obviously, we like to believe that we're solving people's problems. That's one of the main ways we make money. is by helping people solve complex problems. So indeed, today is the announcement of Ring 8, the next generation of Scality Ring coming out. And I'll go through some of what's behind this release from our customer experiences, and then obviously what exactly is in the newest release. And I think one of the key things that's been behind this, we started with this idea of Zinco, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and this has been an ongoing discussion since we started with our customers. And so we are really on a digital transformation journey with a number of our customers, and this has been a very educational experience, I think, for all of us, but we believe that this is really happening. When I first started selling Scality in 2010, explaining to people what object storage was a 45-minute conversation. And today, that's drastically changed. People are asking us for object storage. They're asking for help moving their infrastructures to new models. And so a lot of the influence of the way things are going is based on the things customers are struggling with. I think edge devices and edge management, and I'll go into a little bit more what that means. Edge is one of those words that's replacing, I don't know, every couple of years there's a new word that comes out that can mean anything, and edge is a bit that word right now. I work on an EU project that we're working on edge-to-edge communications, synchronization of edge devices, and even defining edge. We've had multi-hour conversations about what an edge is, so we'll go too into the details, but we'll talk a little bit about what is core, what is edge, and what we're seeing people doing between these two. And then this mix of on-premises infrastructures deployed to be able to use cloud-like models, using IT as a service internally. We're seeing that really taking off now, and that's pushing us in certain directions with the technology, helping companies provide a service in-house that looks very much more like an AWS to their employees. And I'll go in a little bit more detail of what we were doing along those lines. And then obviously the hybridization having something on premise, something in a cloud, making decisions that are strategic or economic about why I put data where at any given time, and helping in that process. And those are some of the key drivers that have been pushing these new releases. So I'd like to go through a few examples to explain this. I'll go through an example in the travel industry, a Temple Health, which is one of our health customers, a European football club, a US biopharma, and then Bloomberg. A few of those not so very far from you. This has been a very exciting customer. Travel industry, massive industry. The requests they get on a daily basis for availability requests for flights is now crossing the line of 1 trillion requests per day for a flight. Interestingly enough, it's the 1st of January that's the peak of the year when everyone's home on vacation thinking, what will I do this year? They get over 1 trillion requests in a 24-hour period to figure out where the cheap flights are. And they have been going through a very significant transformation, wanting all of this data that they're collecting, be it logs, be it boarding passes, being it all kinds of different data, turning that into business intelligence and selling it to their customers as well. We've just recently deployed another Scality ring. They actually have a number of them. And this Scality ring is taking the logs of the transaction requests and storing them away at a rate of 1 petabyte a day to be used with Splunk. We would have liked that to be an S3 interface. It turned out that Splunk wasn't quite ready, so it's a file system interface. But that gives you an idea of the scale of a system like this, storing. They keep the logs for about 10 days and storing 1 petabyte a day and then doing analytics on the set of logs. Another component is an edge core. There's two edge core components. One of them is boarding passes, the PDFs of boarding passes being made available in kiosks in airports or on your devices. And then having local sites in very remote areas to reduce latency. If you're working in Australia, having lower latency is very helpful to have an edge site that accompanies the core.
So there's no there's no edge Scality configuration. The edge part just refers to the source of the data coming into the central Scality.
So not exactly. I will give you an example where there is an edge Scality configuration, and we're getting requests more and more for basically a very small ring at an edge. This is part when we talk about this distributed mini clouds with data distribution. There will be small Scality rings deployed in remote locations.
What sort of size? 10 terabytes.
That would be more like 200 terabytes.
200 terabytes.
We already have a customer that has 8 points of presence around the world with small Scality rings, basically 1 year worth of data. And I believe we have eight worldwide locations and in the central platform. We're getting a lot of requests for that by large corporations. We have a central platform that has the best of what we can offer as far as durability, typically a 2 or 3 site configuration, and then a small in our parlance.
With lower durability.
With lower durability that's replicating to the central platform.
Yeah.
So you had a Splunk here, the previous slide Spark, I suppose S3 or interfaces. So are these hybrid clusters or are still hard drives in the majority? I mean, sequential workloads or some run?
Majority hard drives, and they're typically tiered designs. I'll give you another example that's very much a tiered design, where you have very, very hot data. Splunk is doing searches, so they're having certain parameters that they index, and then they store large volumes of data. And when they do the indexing, then that's a very common behavior with Hadoop-like workloads.
Yeah. Some SSD external to the cluster.
Right. Some SSD, but our systems, we do have a few deployed that are pure flash, but generally speaking, we're still talking about hard drives and very, very large hard drives. The system that's taking
do you need
in
SMR or we are still on the
just standard drives. The SMRs were a very challenging experiment.
Yeah, we tried SMR. It was just not worth it.
No, yes, it's just Western Digital is pushing it really hard.
Well, I think
I don't see anybody adopting it, but that is
we're definitely seeing a resurgence of interest in tape because of the price of.
Is it liable to go away if people can't get LTO-8 tapes?
Well, that's an interesting
I know
question.
some people who have a lot of stock and they're very happy because they're jacking up the price and they feel that they have enough stock to survive a while.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the future is still to be told, but
You've got to figure
definitely we do see a reappearing of tape. Tape is not dead.
Between Carlos Ghosn and LTO-8, the Japanese judicial system is very busy right now. But
Can you give an example of the lower durability of the edge and the durability level in the center?
So on the edge, we typically do an erasure coding scheme, our standard erasure coding scheme, which is 9 chunks, 3 replication chunks. If we're using just a 3-server configuration, we'll typically go to a 7.5. So that's actually relatively high.
So we practically can lose a server plus 1 disk.
A server plus 1 disk is, but not a server plus 1 disk is not possible on a 3-server configuration. So if you lose a server, you can't lose any more on a 3-server.
So it's a 1 server.
1 server.
And in the center?
And in the center, the typical configuration, the one that's our very sweet spot is stretched across 3 sites, 7 pieces of data, 5 erasure codes. You can then lose an entire site.
So I'm thinking 93 at the edge and 75 at the center.
Exactly. So that's
or if it's multiple racks, you can.
right. Multiple racks. A vast majority of our key big systems, core systems, if you like, are geo-distributed, but typically metro area.
Do you see QLC NAND as a potential replacement for hard drives anytime soon for some
We're-
application at least? Or
We're in the process of doing a very large-scale benchmark with those this fall. I think absolutely. This particular customer is moving as quickly as they can to pure flash because of, if nothing else, electricity, power consumption. Power consumption and cooling is a huge advantage.
But it's still more expensive. and,
It's still very expensive, but
Basically, yeah, I mean, there's a few of our customers around the world that are interested in this. I would describe them as rich customer.
yeah.
They really have no money problem,
Oh.
and they just go for simplification. They're on the way to have everything be flashed, just so that. Also, they're hoping, which is not yet completely proven, that the longevity of flash is going to be better than hard drive, but it's too early to really say. We definitely have hard drives now that are in the 7 years old, and they're still working and they're fine. The systems are fine. When we initially deployed, we thought that the longevity of a server with their hard drive would be 5 years, but the field shows us it's longer than that, actually. You can keep a server in production longer than 5 years.
Yeah, also by increasing the duplication factor, potentially you can have more failures in the clusters. So
I mean, drive failures are really not an issue with our technology. So indeed, you can accept longer longevity. Brad, maybe you should come back to Ulrike's question about what do we call call.
So I have a slide that I would like to use to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, sorry.
I'm holding your question, but I'm not sure you'll get a definitive answers. But I can tell you what we. But in some sense, part of the answer is a corporate system that's in a central location and is better protected than branch offices. That's probably one of the cases that we're seeing the most as core. But I'll show you a slide that has some information about core that I find sort of provocative, but it's not our. Thank you. So there's a first example, and these guys are definitely moving toward the object model. The idea of having an HTTP REST interface to all these vast volumes of data for all their different applications is really what's driving them. And from an architectural deployment perspective, using HTTP as a protocol rather than NFS really makes their life much simpler at the scale that they're working at. Healthcare, this is more, I would say, traditional. PACS archive. One of the historical things with PACS archives was tape being used as a second tier, and this is a very strong requirement now that when a patient comes in to a hospital, the doctors want to be able to see the entire patient history, and they don't want to be able to have to call things back up from tape. So you end up with an interesting situation where the extended tier of storage is being used like the primary tier of storage in a sense, because you have a doctor looking at very, very large images that were just scanned that are on their primary tier, but then when they call up the historical data on the colder tier, they expect the data to be available immediately. So it's a bit of a tricky problem, but this has been very, very successful because we can keep the extended data available on hard drives for a reasonable price, and we don't have quite as much I/O because it's less frequently called back up. So you manage to provide low latency access to a cold tier.
Any numbers on latency in comparison?
So well. A very fast SAN will be typically under 5 millisecond latency, and we're looking at 30, 40 milliseconds to get things back on our side. What we do have as feedback from doctors is they're not unhappy. That's kind of, there's a magic number. If you wait, we consider it to be roughly a second. If you wait any longer than a second, you become unhappy, and we don't have complaints.
The human brain pretty much takes a tenth of a second, so 100 milliseconds to process an image. So we're at less than half that, between a third and half that. So we're faster than a human brain. So any application where we deliver content to a human brain through a network, we're going to be faster than the human brain. So we're much slower than a SAN, but it doesn't matter because our customers do human brain.
And that was our experience with the email industry. If you click on an email and it pops up in say, less than 500 milliseconds, it's not really a problem.
Are you saying that when I, as a doctor, look at a patient's mammogram or something, triggers will then move the rest of that patient's stuff out of cold storage into something warmer automatically in the anticipation that I will be looking at that?
No.
You're not doing anything.
They're not.
We are not cold storage.
We're
yet.
not. We're
warm.
We're big hot storage, if you like. We're big warm storage.
Okay.
So there's no data movement, and that's the part that's really the hospitals really
It's
like.
not like tiering.
It's
Okay,
not
we don't
tiering.
tier.
No,
We are able to build a big, warm enough storage, which is a very different approach from the traditional approach that would
so
have
that fundamentally
hot
I
and
didn't
cold.
understand.
We are a big set of warm
yeah.
at a price that is very close to cold.
Okay.
So we enable, for some of our customers, we really enable new workflow because of what we can do.
Yeah.
Because of that, wouldn't you be also interested in triggering markets like museums that start digitalizing and making available
It was one of the, when I was displaying the market, we have many national libraries. So it happens to be that I don't know of any museum that we have, but we have, this is a, libraries is for the digitalization of their asset, and we have
The Scottish Library, Scottish National Library is our customer. They're digitizing their assets and storing them all.
Start with paintings and stuff like
Right.
that to make available in high resolution.
Right. Absolutely.
Images, so
Yeah.
that would be
Absolutely. That's a
So
wonderful.
this is definitely a target market for us.
That's a very and it's also an excellent usage for an object storage. So we're all in that market. If you have contacts,
Yes.
you have my email address.
But only in Berlin, so.
That works for
Okay.
me. That
Welcome
works
to
for me.
Berlin.
That works for me. But so I think this is interesting because it's this. It's an archive, but it's a used archive. It's a warm archive, and we're seeing this in many fields. And the medical industry is definitely moving in this direction very, very quickly. Because today, a doctor who's a cancer pathology, you want to see all the data that you have, all of the images that are associated with that pathology, and you want to see them now. But so you don't want to pull them up on tape. From tape and come back tomorrow to look at them. And this is being very, very successful. But again, this is all file system access because this industry, there's multiple applications very often that are using the same data. And so you have to move all the applications before you can move your data. This is different because it's all brand new. Obviously, sports are a place where people are pushing very hard to have digital experiences, stadiums that offer live replays to their users that can monitor hooligan behavior, all kinds of things. So this is a platform that's deployed, a very, very modern stadium, deployed to have a Scality ring, distributed across 2 sites because some of the data is very, very valuable. And being able to have live access to very large volumes of data, using it as an origin server to stream old game information, new game information, things. One of the things that's going to be added is a medical archive onto this platform because football players injured themselves.
You can also run real-time analytics because when you're talking sports, we're talking also motorsports, for instance, and each race has been more or less each move is analysed on the spot.
Right.
Would that be possible as well?
Some of that will probably require faster storage.
Yeah.
But
This would not be our core use case.
that would not be our core use case.
There typically would be another system deployed. An example of that, we work a lot with a company called Weka for AI use case. That's very, very fast file system on Flash. And so typically the analytics will be done on Weka, will be the long-term repository of data.
That's my next slide.
Okay, well.
But as an example in that particular, we have my customers actually, they spoke about it publicly. Orange in France, who has chosen to have all of the media assets that they distribute are only stored in a single format, and they're real-time transcoded into the appropriate format for the device. And there's a big advantage to that. They don't store 10 formats. They only store one format. They transcode in real time, and they can do that because they have about 20 million users' data, and rather than transcoding them all up front, they just store the data. They have, again, the latency isn't tiny, but it's reliably small. So they can actually transcode in real time. The users receive in the format they need, this just-in-time encoding, all the OTT kinds of ways of distribution. And we're doing more and more of that kind of thing. So we have an offer that's always, that you can always count on the data being available quick enough to do things like that.
And this is a good example of what I was saying earlier. This is a customer that was able to transform its workflow and have a more efficient workflow thanks to our storage being fast enough.
Do you have customer asking for sort of hyper-converged system? Because you provide all these files, and then some analytics, some or in this case transcoding. Okay, so having the storage closer to the GPU or whatever, maybe it is or help somehow.
So we have, I mean, the idea of HTTP as the lingua franca for storage as Git is helping a lot, because then any application that needs data can get it. But having things like AI, we're definitely seeing in machine learning, we're seeing things like technologies like Weka that are very dedicated to these. Getting data to a GPU is not our world. That's the sub-millisecond kind of
and
latencies.
And the other thing is, so on the same tone, but actually, did you had any requests from users to run like containers in your system? So if something comes in, you trigger a container to do metadata tagging or whatever that helps you.
We've had a certain amount of requests that we're not completely sure what to do with this Kubernetes container storage model, and don't have a definitive answer to that.
The Lambda style kind of thing.
Right. From my perspective, the Lambda style thing, you're going to see most of the Lambdas in a place like Amazon uses S3. So
which means that they will be fit for us in
be
that
fit,
form of
right.
usage.
But container storage is kind of a quicksand area right now.
Premises, maybe it's easier, no? So, but if it was more on the serverless kind of way of thinking.
Yeah, we're definitely strong believers in the Lambda world, but we believe that object is a great way to work in that space.
Container storage is not an issue, because if you're doing containers right, you're not storing in the container.
Exactly. Thank you for saying it.
That's utterly wrong.
That doesn't stop us people from asking.
Yeah, but they're idiots. And
No, but you're totally right. It wasn't designed for that.
Yeah.
and so you're going to be storing in S3, you're going to be storing in an Azure blob or
Right,
whatever.
right.
And so your existing
Totally.
That's absolutely our vision. It isn't shared by everyone. But I mean, AWS Elastic Block Storage is quite popular, and so things like that will remain popular, I believe, for a long time. But
Can I ask about Nimble InfoSite?
Yeah.
A lot of vendors are retrofitting service-based analytics to their storage products based on the Nimble InfoSite idea.
Well,
Are you seeing any demand for that with the Ring?
so there's two answers to that. First of all, we launched about 2 years ago a service that we call Cloud Monitor, which is, I mean, it's not as sophisticated as InfoSight, but it's the same concept. So it connects to our customer system, it does predictive analytics, and it allows us to potentially see problems and solve problems before they happen. So we do have a service like this, and we've had for, I think, 2 years.
yeah, about 2 years, yeah.
So that's answer one. Now, answer two, you know that we have a very close partnership with HPE. And we are planning to have the system integrated with InfoSight.
Yeah, nobody else can write that, okay? Because it's my question.
You talk with your friends.
Brilliant. Thank you.
But we're definitely working on integrating.
So I think wasn't the intention that HP would basically expose APIs out of InfoSight that would allow people like yourselves to write to it in order to push your data into the platform, and that's probably the way that they'll implement it. But you're probably not allowed to say that.
I don't know. That's deeper down that.
I don't know.
I think the partners like yourselves, they would expose APIs into the
Right. So here's an example, a little bit of several things. It's a genomics, AI work, GPUs. They're using a Weka IO platform that I'm sure you're familiar with that tiers data off to a Scality ring so that you can have very low latency, very rapid access, fraction of the data and then a large fraction available on a Scality storage platform. So it's initially something beyond a petabyte. The idea is it's going to be moving up into about 10 petabytes. Now, one of their concerns here was that this is research work that's very time sensitive. They can't, if they have a downtime, they don't want to be able to have to stop. So the platform they built is quite interesting. They're using Scality's Zinco technology in the cloud to push a copy of the data into a public cloud. So Zinco runs in the cloud. They replicate a copy of all this Weka data into the cloud, and Weka can also run in a cloud. So instead of having two data centers of their own, their failover site is a public cloud. And their intention is we'll never use the public cloud. They're pushing the data up into the public cloud, so the cost is relatively modest. So Zinco replicates the data into the public cloud. If ever their primary site goes down, power failure, whatever reason, they can run their work in a public cloud, fire up an instance of Weka. The Weka instance sucks all the data, at least all the metadata, back out of the Scality through the Scality Zinco interface using the public cloud's backend, and you're off and running again with your Weka instance in the cloud with all the GPUs and everything you need to keep running the research work that's going on. So it's an interesting hybridization, and we're seeing this more and more, the idea that a public cloud is a very interesting place for disaster recovery. Pushing a copy of all of your data into a public cloud, and maybe not even deploying the necessary infrastructure to do the work in the cloud, but if you have to, you can deploy it relatively quickly.
Why not store the Weka sourced data in Weka in the public cloud, and not have Scality there at all?
So they really wanted to work on-premise with their data as their primary workload.
Yeah.
Having very low latency, very, very fast system on-premise. But they wanted...
But that's replicating the data to the cloud.
But it's replicating the data
to Weka in the cloud.
So they're using, what they're doing, so Weka has an automatic mechanism to store all of the data in S3, right? So for instance, the Weka component here will have, I don't know, probably 100 terabytes of very NVMe flash.
Yeah.
And it's pushing data that's not being actively used to Scality. When it needs that data, it pulls it back in a transparent fashion. So it's cost. So you instead of using a petabyte of NVMe, you have 100 terabytes of NVMe.
And also, you're not going to spin up the Weka instances in EC2 until you actually need to use them.
Right.
And that's the cost component.
Right. So, and I think it's a very interesting model because the idea is it's an if and only if situation. We can do it if we have to.
Do you have a partnership with Weka?
Yes, we do.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
You do?
We do.
We have a partnership with Weka, yes. We even
And
launched,
Zinco
and that's
features
public.
in it.
What?
And Zinco features in it as well.
What does that mean?
Zenko features in Zenko.
This deal was not part of the partnership, but it's the same interface.
Okay.
And let me plug in here because we talk about Weka. We launched with Weka and HPE together, the three companies together, what we call the AI data node, where Weka and Scality are installed together on the same hardware on a reference architecture. And it's pretty neat.
So you have Weka running on pure NVMe with converged Ethernet, like 150 microsecond, 200 microsecond kind of latencies.
Data node.
Yeah,
AI data node. Yeah, that's the name of the product.
You must have a new hidden marketing system.
And on the same servers are big fat hard drives that Scality is storing all the data on a Scality S3 interface. And so you can grow the platform by adding more servers. And this is a very interesting usage because it's a mix of an AI, it's a very large scale AI platform. So you have the very, very low latency read-write of the AI platform. But we find this very interesting because we're seeing more and more this notion of hybridization, using the cloud not necessarily as your primary operating mode, but as a secondary operating mode. Obviously, there was this notion of overflowing into a public cloud, but more and more we're seeing the notion of disaster recovery in a public cloud. And obviously things like this publication of the cold storage tier at Amazon that's $12,000 a petabyte per year has really changed people's thinking about putting a copy in a public cloud of data.
Brad, I just want to give you a time check that you have 25 minutes left, and you probably want to keep 5 minutes for the demo.
I do, so.
And these people may ask you a few more questions.
They probably will. So, and then this last one, which is a pure Zenko usage, pushing data to multiple clouds simultaneously at Bloomberg. And this was definitely a vision that Bloomberg had, wanting to be able to use CDN and data distribution, multiple sites around the world. So rather than pushing data to a first site, then replicating it across sites and incurring egress fees between the sites, that we push a copy of data, they push a copy locally on the system, and Zenko manages pushing multiple copies to multiple data infrastructures of a large collection of data that's distributed worldwide. And this is obviously a key business commitment of a company like Bloomberg to make sure that they have their data very widely accessible across multiple platforms. So pushing a large collection of assets on a daily basis, being able to have a global vision of where all the data is at the same time, were very much Zenko functionalities. We're having some customers looking in this model kind of flipped over on its head, which is putting Zenko in a public cloud. The rights holders are doing more and more delivery to public cloud infrastructures, and then just bringing the data in-house that you need in-house. So this model is a distribution model with a company like Bloomberg who's generating content. The content consumers, the broadcasters, are looking at this model flipped over where Zenko is actually deployed in a public cloud instead of privately. So those are some of the key kinds of usages that we're seeing in this space. And then this is accompanied, obviously, with all the transitions that are going on in the world. These are some IDC directions 2019. Obviously, this has been talked about for quite a while. They say 80% of the growth in data is unstructured data rather than structured data. And the creation of all these, obviously these billions of devices, we've all got these edge devices, if you like, generating data all the time, are one of the key sources of all this petabytes of data. And This third line is something I've already talked a little bit about, the fact that a lot of corporations are wanting to break the data silos inside their companies, because if you're doing data analytics, you need to have common access. And the challenge is availability and control. Now back to the question about what's core. This is a funny number from IDC, and we're still working on figuring this out, but IDC says there would be 39,000 core clouds. And so that one thing that means it's not just the big the big 4 or 5, right? It's more than that. And we believe from what we're seeing with customers, most major corporations have a core, and they believe in this idea of having a core.
I'm sorry if I'm interrupting, but is it that I define it as public cloud? Can it also be a private cloud? Because I think there is.
It can be a private cloud. It can
We
absolutely
definitely,
be a private cloud.
and I think that exactly. Right, and the 39,000 says to me that it can't just be public. There's not that much demand. But we are seeing, this is a change that we've seen probably in the last 2 years, a lot of very large, especially banking companies, but some of those that I mentioned, have a private cloud that is presented internally as just like AWS. And they want all the functionality. And so the IT department has moved completely away from the model of fill in a request for 20 terabytes of storage, and we'll get back to you in 2 weeks. The requirement is there's an API. Everything is API driven.
It's totally automatic, and you'll see that there are functionalities that we release in Ring 8 to support this in a way that is consistent with the enterprise world. And one big difference between a public cloud and the enterprise world is public cloud pretty much wants their users to have unlimited consumption, so they don't give them any tools to limit consumption. The enterprise world want to be able to limit their users to some limits and to some budget. Yes,
Absolutely.
but they want the self-service,
the self-service
with
is the
the
big
limit,
thing.
which is a very different concept than the public cloud
Right,
concept. And so we developed functionality around that.
Because there is no such thing as a quota on AWS. It's the credit card is the quota. But it's interesting here because they say 39,000 core clouds, 7 million service edges to be defined, and 39 billion devices. The 39 billion devices is pretty easy.
We understand.
The watches, the telephones, the Fitbits, all this. Your new refrigerator that you wish would shut up and things like that. Right.
Even more edgy.
Yeah. So there's obviously a spectrum of edge, but the 7 million service edges, we believe, to a large extent, is things like a Tesla charging station that downloads data. It's like a sophisticated service kiosk and things like that. And it's also the branch offices. I'm sorry?
It's not a classic supermarket point of sale terminal.
I would say that's
a device.
That's a device. Our perspective on this.
System would be the
So the service edge would be
in the store, like one per store.
Would be one in a large supermarket.
So you may have several points of sales. There are different devices, but you have one service edge in the store.
So Tesco has a service edge in the store. All of the machines.
What's the difference between a Tesla charging station and a point of sale terminal? Why wouldn't you have
Okay,
the
so
charging station as a whole?
So let's say the Tesla charging station as we know it today is probably a device, but we envisage that there's going to be some consolidation at the home of all the devices on the home, and that would be a service edge.
It's probably like those services when you're parking somewhere and you don't take a ticket, but you have an app.
Okay.
That would be that kind of edge.
So Chris, think about when we use Brad's example of Tesco. Tesco used to work at a branch scenario where they had AS400s deployed in each of the branches, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And those systems would download all the data for pricing for all the tills. They would also take all the data and process it for all the tills, and then upload it to the main core in the middle of the night. And then it could work independently, so if the link went down, it could work independently.
When are you going to recruit this guy?
So my wife used to work for Tesco, so she used to work on what was called the checkout plus help desk, and she supported those environments.
Right.
And when people talk about Edge now, I say, well, we had that 20 years ago. It just wasn't as quick as it is now.
Right,
It existed.
And it wasn't as configurable because
it
today
wasn't sophisticated.
it will be a Kubernetes cluster running in the system that you can completely repurpose the analytics that it's doing overnight.
But the difference is you could do compute on that data.
Absolutely,
Edge.
absolutely.
And that's what I think an edge, a service
Absolutely.
edge would be.
And this
Price.
modest mid-range volume of data locally.
Remote and branch offices.
I think from our perspective, that's one of the things in this space, but I think there's others. I think we're working on an RFP where there's some branches that do pretty sophisticated analytics on satellite systems, I shouldn't say anymore, and collect data centrally.
Embedded systems.
Embedded systems in a sense. So I think you're going to see more and more of these kinds of things that have quite a bit of data locally, enough data to do decision making locally. But then a long-term analytics and things like that, historical analysis on a central system and keeping data for longer periods of time. So that doesn't completely answer the question, but I think this core number is very interesting. It's a very provocative number, and I think it's useful.
You can't really define it because it's like a bit like virtualization when it came up. Everyone had their own kind of definition. So,
Exactly.
It's just like where you find the common denominator where you can actually tap into each other's products and help each other out.
Exactly.
It's a bit like that.
And so there's a lot of questions that are being asked around this, and how much do the edges communicate with each other and those kinds of things. So those are driving this a lot. So that brings us to Ring 8 and some of the driving forces behind that. We have two core technologies, Ring 8, Ring 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The key concept of Ring was to provide the kind of scale-out storage that's being provided by these giants of the AWSs and the Google Clouds. On-premise, on your own systems, being able to have an on-demand storage system. Software-defined storage for petabyte scale, bare metal anywhere from a few to many servers. Deployed primarily in the core, but we're seeing small instances deploying on more and more sophisticated edges. And then obviously, data access is in-band, meaning we push data in, we pull data back out again. Zinco, one of the main drivers behind that is we began to see that this public cloud idea was really taking off. People are using it more and more. They're using it in very sophisticated ways. And they're not going to have all their data on-prem, all the data in the cloud. So we need orchestration, global namespaces. We need to be able to move data between two places based on policies. We need to be able to search data. And we need to put it on-premise, pushing data into a cloud, or in a cloud, pushing data on-prem. And we also need to be able to have the system be aware of data that it stores, or the out-of-band, which is data that it did not store, but it needs to be aware of. So someone filling an Amazon bucket up with edge devices, the central system needs to be made aware of that data all being stored. So working with notification mechanisms. So those are the two children of the Scality family. So now down into a little bit more into the features. Obviously security, I haven't spoken a lot about security, but this is very, very important today. Encryption is becoming very, very high priority. We've done this before, but we have the KMEP 1.2 standard is available now so that you can on-the-fly encryption of inbound data into an S3 platform. Very similar method to the way AWS does that. Multiple key management system solutions now instead of a bespoke solution like we had initially. We're also able now to deploy SC Linux in enforce mode for customers who need a little bit higher level of security on their platform. This is very interesting to us because we're having more and more law enforcement and
so that's the kind of thing that is absolutely not shiny from a marketing standpoint, but super important for the real customers of this world. That goes along with the fact that something that's been requested by the security people for a long time,
that's required a lot of work, is we can now have no processes running in privileged mode, no super user processes, no root processes on the system, and that's been a lot of work. So Ring 8 can run without super user process on the system. So SCN Force Linux, no ring processes in super user mode. So it gives us access to some other market, and it makes the platform more secure. So those have been background tasks that we've been working on for quite a long time. And then the last one, Kerberos authentication for NFS-v4, so NFS-v4 protocol, but also Kerberos authentication, because obviously NFS-v3 has very little to offer from a security perspective.
So Brad, on the third one, the secure one, the privilege mode one, how much of that is related to, if at all, being able to run Scality in the public cloud?
Very little. We, as a matter of fact, I would say people who've talked about running Scality in public cloud aren't as concerned about that. I think, containers everybody runs as root, and it doesn't keep them up at night. Right? But it's been very important. You can debate it all day long. Is it more secure? It is more secure. Does it solve your security problems? Obviously not. If somebody breaks into your system, you're still in trouble. But it's a very important tick box in the security space, and it's a place we needed to get to. And it's been a lot of work.
Yeah.
Now, to go along with this question of being able to provide multi-tenancy, being able to provide as a service to platforms, to our customers, providing those to their employees, we've added two key things that are new. The first one Jerome already mentioned, S3-based capacity quotas. Now, obviously, AWS doesn't believe in quotas, but people that are giving their users access to their storage platforms believe in quotas. So this allows us, a bank, for instance, to let their developers have access to unlimited storage within their quota and be able to keep control over users who might store petabytes of data unknowingly. So that's a non-standard, obviously S3 feature, but very useful if you're deploying a private cloud. And then we've really completed the full implementation of the AWS identity and access management policies with the addition of bucket policies. We had user and group policies, and now we've added bucket policies. And we do believe that this particular feature makes us very unique in the industry. We support the IAM API, so the IAM endpoint on AWS is a very sophisticated role-based access model. This allows many things to be done. One of the key things that's very interesting that it allows is what's called federated identity management. A large bank user of a public cloud can use their Active Directory credentials to get access using IAM to AWS resources without having an account, without using their credit card. And we've seen this really take off with our customers. Federated identity management, having an identity system that allows a user access to a system. A customer just recently implemented Cloud Foundry's interface so that a user can just, in one click, get a bucket that they cannot modify, change the name of, they can't change to another bucket, but they have an infinite volume bucket on their system. And now they're going to be able to have a quota-based bucket volume, but with a single click, you can have access to AWS-like services. And this feature is very useful when you're deploying a on-premise cloud, a core, one of these 30,000 core platforms, to give control to the people that are managing the system. In a sense, it becomes a self-service, kind of an infinitely flexible self-service platform. And I'll show you a little demo of what that looks like.
Have you put workflow around the quotas at all? And the sort of example I'm thinking about is if you're in an enterprise where you're giving somebody a bucket with a quota, and they get close to it, and you want to know about it, so you can instance some sort of workflow that allows them to go off and request more, or
right,
or do something. Or is it just hard number that you just get to?
It's a hard number for now, and we got to work on some of the details of it because it isn't an AWS standard that we can copy in a sense. But that's a very good idea. I take note.
Yeah, and honestly, our customers are already super happy we did this.
Yeah.
But you know what the enterprise is like. They like workflow that allows them to go off and
Exactly.
reauthorize something tied to a budget. Put it
Right.
To, put it to an account code somewhere so that they can charge it, and that's a bit of workflow
Right.
in the background they might want to automate.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they'll want to be able to do is life cycle as well.
Yeah.
Life cycle the data off to tape.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah, absolutely. And so life cycle is fully, so speaking of, the AWS Bucket Lifecycle Transition API has been implemented. So we have the replication API, the expiration API, and the transition API. So all of the lifecycle tools that are available with AWS are also available in our system. So you can tier to another ring, you can tier to another public cloud, to multiple public clouds, all of the different places you can do with Zinco. Also, the bucket notification API that allows you to communicate that the data has been changed in a bucket. And we've, I would say, reactivated our Swift API support so that we have all the most recent versions of Swift. If you have a Scality ring and need to have the Swift API, you can deploy the Swift infrastructure and have a Swift platform, but we do have those in production. And as I mentioned, NFS v4 is now available. It's based on the Ganesha stack, and it has the Kerberos authentication. It also allows us to present NFS v2, 3, and 4, and SMB all in IPv6. So we can have IPv6 endpoint functionality for the traditional file system interfaces. So those are all new things in version 8. So as kind of a wrap up, some key core hard work on enterprise security, enhanced multi-tenancy, and notably the completion of the IAM API and the S3 quota system that we've added. Also, the bucket lifecycle transition, bucket notification API, and support of the Swift API, and now NFS v4 and IPv6. So those are the key ring version 8 changes. And actually, the thing we talked about with 3 servers was actually available as of ring v7. And one of the components of this is what we call extended data management, which allows you to do data orchestration between a ring and multiple public clouds. We currently support AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that means Zengo is already integrated in Ring 8, so I don't have to buy it as an extra.
That's correct.
Right.
And that's one of the new, and that's, yeah, but that comes with support. That's the one of the new addition of Ring 8 is that we combine the power of Ring and Zenko in a hybrid cloud offering.
So the previous version of Zenko needed a Kubernetes cluster running. How do you manage it when it's inside the Ring 8?
Still need the Kubernetes cluster. So it's additional.
But we provide it.
But the software is all
Is it in the
provided.
same cluster or is it a separate cluster?
So the Kubernetes cluster is on separate machines,
Yeah.
Okay.
but the software is all included.
So the license
And
included.
the license
but
included.
To have the XDM functionalities, you actually do need to install a few more machines. And we considered possible. So technically, we could have put them on the same machines. But it would have taken some performance away from the ring. And there are customers who still want the ring without the XDM functionalities. And we decided it was a cleaner architecture proposal to say, well, you've got the ring as your storage, and the XDM functionalities, they're in the same license model, but deploy some other boxes for that.
2 machines.
One, 3, or 5.
Yeah, it's one minimum.
1 minimum if you don't need high availability, 3 if you need some high availability, and 5 if it's life dependent type of.
One, 3, or 5.
Odd numbers, 1, 3, and 5.
We cannot. It's 1, 3, or 5.
When you vote, you never want an even number of voters. Yes.
Machine rate.
Yeah.
And did you talk about metadata search?
Global, yes. So metadata search is available within this model, as well as the possibility of out-of-band inclusion of data that's in other object platforms and data that's in other NASs. So you could have a global vision across a whole estate of storage systems.
So how is the installation process? I mean, do you have an automated kind of installation process for all this? Because now it's a lot of components.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So as of today, the installation of the XDM components is separate but automated, but the installation process is globally an automated process. It's based on what do you call it? A manifest of all the machines that you believe should be there, and then it automatically installs all the components as you've chosen to deploy them.
Okay.
But it's a much simpler process than it once was. It typically takes about an hour once you have the server set up to deploy a platform. That's without XDM. XDM is a semi-automatic installation process as well, using Kubernetes.
And that's integrated with Ring A.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just a question. If it's the integration is done on Ring 8, all your customers will pass on Ring 8 at the same time, or they are in Ring 6, 7, or
We have a customer running Ring 4.
We have Japanese customers.
Yeah,
And-
No. I mean,
They change when they change.
yeah.
okay, but they will have the possibility to have this kind of features with Vehicle, and how you will manage it, or
So-
they have to move to Ring 8 together.
So we're working through the process of what customers will absolutely have to do. Some customers on 7 platforms will probably be able to have most of this functionality without moving to 8, and then people will gradually be moving to 8. The 8 is just now coming out. Typically 6 months after a version comes out, the kinds of customers that we have start moving to it. That we have a few early adopters, and then the rest of them move to it over time. Now I can stop and do a quick demo, or I can keep going a couple more slides.
Do the demo.
Let's go to the demo.
Let's have the slides.
Let's not make it difficult.
We always need a contrarian in the room,
Yeah.
and guess who this is?
Oh no,
No, this is a
Another question. I mean, it's been rather quiet about your company for a while. I mean, if you look at your press release, I'm sorry,
What's the question?
my question is, there hasn't been a lot happening within the last 12 months. If I follow your press release with like 2.
So we have been advised by our press agency to issue less press releases. So it doesn't mean that we have less.
Half a year, I'm sorry. It kind of sucks.
Is it half a year that we haven't issued a press release?
No, you had 2 this year.
I would be surprised.
Well, on the American side, there's only 2.
I don't know, Rachel's just...
I'm surprised, to be honest. Which site are you on?
The American.
I think it's a distribution problem because I believe I don't know. I know we issue less press release.
There's been not so many really valuable information.
Ulrika, it could also be that Scality tends to focus distribution in certain markets.
I understand.
And
I'm just saying it's about the value of the
Rachel, can you go on our site and see, because I have all of them on this
It's
site.
nasty.
So there is a deliberate decision we took about 9 months ago to issue less press release because we were told that we were issuing too many. So I'm like, I'll do whatever you want. You're our customer. In terms of news, I mean, we try to. I mean, we've had both product and customer news and partnership news constantly. So it's more how we communicate it to you, like. The Freenode ring that we talked about was announced a year ago.
On the internal distribution, I actually get considerably probably a lot more information just for press releases.
I think it's more a question of communication with this community than the fact that we haven't had activity.
That's what I'm saying.
But what do you want? Because honestly, you're my customer, so.
I count about 12 or so.
Yes, can I
Yeah,
just...
that's what I don't understand.
Ulrika, A3 started about maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, covering Germany again.
Yeah, we dropped Germany for a while.
It was being covered by someone else out of the US.
And really badly, you have to say. So for me,
And
it's
Scality, yeah.
If it hadn't been for
Yeah,
me,
okay, so we've tried a few things, we've done mistakes. All of our worldwide press is now covered by A3. It's going to improve.
Good on you. No, that's what I'm saying, you know, I have to...
Okay, no, so that's I take the feedback. Thank you, I get it. So it's not so much that we didn't have news, it's that we didn't communicate the news
That's what I'm
appropriately.
saying. I know that you have news because I followed you internally on the industry.
Yeah, okay.
So,
Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, it's all right.
So we'll come back in this we're back in Germany at the end of the year, is that true? So this is the web interface to the platform. This system is deployed on multiple sites. I think one thing that's interesting and new here, we have things like performance statistics of the top 10 slowest and top to bottom, top 10 and by disks across a whole platform, which can be very useful. One of the tabs on this is something that we've been talking about quite a lot, which is the IAM functionality. We have the IAM API, that's AWS's API supported. You can literally take Amazon's command line tools, download them onto your laptop, talk to Scality's IAM like you do to AWS's. But customers said, okay, but we're not API people. How do we create users? How do we create access rights? So they said, like AWS does on their website. So this is the interface that allows you to create policies. You can see I've had created a press user group that has a Chris E and a Chris M in it on the platform. And then you can create all of the policies associated with IAM. So you have a web-based IAM functionality like you would have on AWS that manages the subscriber. And I'm being told time's up.
I didn't say it.
Okay. So the other, she's lurking. So the other thing that we've done, S3 we have found is very, very challenging for people to get their minds around. And so these are tools to help our customer base, help their users get used to the system. So we have created an S3 browser that's part of the application. Here I've created, in the press group, we have, you can see here in the console, we have metrics as well. These are the number of requests that have made, the kinds of requests that have been made. And in that press group, we have two users, Chris C and Chris M. Both of these guys have created buckets. So we got the Piccadilly bucket and the Haymarket bucket. In the Piccadilly market, we've got a file called CE, and we can change the attributes of a file, for instance, make it publicly available, see the different kinds of policies that are associated with it. If I make that bucket public available, I have, then that object becomes publicly available.
I was expecting a catfish.
I'll show the policy editor just quickly, just to
And so again, that really complex problem of policy management, IAM policies. For instance, here is we can edit a read-only policy. You get the JavaScript that you can edit on the read-only policy, create your own policies. You can do all this, obviously, through the API with all this. You can use AWS's documentation to do this, but you can also use this interface. And we found this really helps customers get started with the system. Once they're up and using the system, their users typically like to use the APIs. And you have 10,000 pages of documentation on AWS about how to use these APIs. So those are some of the basics of the interface. And this interface is now relatively stable. This is version 7 and version 8. And these are just simplifications to help users work with the platform. And it's something AWS has had for a long, long time, and we needed to have to make customers kind of get started with these new kinds of systems.
Are you sort of preempting the concept of Amazon delivering S3 on premises by trying to make yourself as S3 friendly as possible before that turns up?
Really, our motivation has been to help our customers I know that sounds trite.
And so, isn't it already deploying S3 on premises with the Outpost somehow? I know it's not.
That's what I was wondering.
So,
Yeah,
I know
I mean,
it's not competitive from the dollar per gigabyte point of view, but from the ecosystem point of view.
There's things I can't say, but
So I'm not trying to be awkward. I'm just thinking, are you just trying to sort of bat that away as an issue before it even starts by making yours as friendly as possible, so that people just think, well, why would I bother going to the Amazon one? I've already got this. It's easily as good.
I think that's a battle we'll never win. I don't know who's ever beaten AWS at anything.
Yeah.
But and I don't want to be I mean, it would be fun to be the first one that succeeds, but I don't want to put myself in that position of trying to be the first one that succeeds. So I think really we're trying to eliminate friction. So many developers around the world understand these APIs, understand these interfaces. They want the same thing. And most of the complaints we get about our technology is this works on AWS, it doesn't work on yours.